Good morning. It's 9 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for being with us. We're studying this quarter the book of Revelation. And we are this morning all the way up to Revelation chapter 14. As a reminder, all the lessons are on YouTube in a playlist. So I think we're through 11 lessons. So this is lesson 12. Last week, I don't know if you felt like this, but 13 has a lot of information. But there's also a lot of things that I feel like in 13 is a really important chapter because, number one, it identifies who the beast is, which is just like from Daniel chapter 7, so it's the nation of Rome. But then you have to figure out, okay, which was the Roman emperor that was the problem. And so we took a look last week at not only the idea that the 666 likely, in my estimation, is referencing Nero. There was something called gematria, which is where it's basically almost like a form of first century graffiti, where they were, Pompeii had the ruins, I love her, whose name is 643 or something like that. And so that was the way you could basically profess your love, but actually not write the name down. And so it took a little bit of decoding to find it. So we talked about that last week. This week, chapter 14, and we'll probably get through chapter 15, that's my guess. 14 is a longer one, 20 verses, but 15 is like, 8 verses? It's really short. And then chapter 16, I'm guessing we'll cover next week, and we'll talk about the Battle of Armageddon. All right, so that's an exciting one for people. So if you have your Bibles, open up to Revelation chapter 14 and verse 1. And so in chapter 12, we saw the devil, the great dragon, Satan, battling God's people, right? So good versus evil in chapter 12. Then in chapter 13, we're sort of introduced to the two beasts, which are the forces that Satan uses, okay, which in the context are Rome, and we talked about how the second one seems to be what some people call the Concilia, but that was basically this cult that you can read about. In the notes, I have lots of references to go read, historical writers, archaeologists. It's not just like some Christian guy saying, well, this is what we think it means, and here's a bunch of facts, right? But there was an emperor cult that built temples around the first century, Asian cities that Rome controlled, and they would make you offer incense to the Roman emperor and worship him as God. So Domitian wanted to be referred to as Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. And if you didn't do that, what would happen? Sometimes they would put you to death. I guess it sort of just depends on what the Roman soldier felt like at the time. But they'd put you to death, and sometimes they just wouldn't give you what archaeologists have discovered, a business license, so that you couldn't buy and sell. And so that's why it says anyone that receives the mark of the beast won't be able to buy and sell, okay? So that's what we looked at in chapter 13. Let's look at chapter 14. Now we're going to be introduced to the good guys, right? The forces for good, God's people. And starting out in Revelation chapter 14 and verse 1, it says this, Then I looked, and behold, a lamb standing on Mount Zion. Okay, what do you think the lamb is? Or who do you think it is? It's Jesus Christ. That's right. Earlier in the book in chapters 5, 5, and 6, you see Christ is represented as a lamb. Okay, John said that, behold the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world. Okay, so you have Jesus Christ standing on Mount Zion. That was another name for what city? Jerusalem. And if you know anything about the geography, Jerusalem was what kind of city? Was it in a plain? It was in the mountains, right? It was a very fortified city. And that's why it was very difficult even for like Rome to conquer when they had to siege the city for like 3 years in 66 to conquer it, okay? So you have Jesus standing on Mount Zion, this fortified position, okay? And with him, he has 144,000 having his Father's name, and some translations say, and basically the Son, the name of the Son, written on their foreheads, okay? So the 144,000, who is that? You don't have to be specifically. It's God's people. We talked about that in chapter 7, okay? So you have in chapter 13 the sea beast, which is likely Domitian, who was represented as a form of Nero. We looked at those resources last week. They're in the notes if you want to read over those more. And then we had this emperor cult that were trying to make God's people worship the emperor and, in a sense, worship the devil, his forces. And now in chapter 14, you have the good guys. You have Jesus. He's on this mountain. And he's got the 144,000 with him, all right? Look at verse 2. I heard a voice from heaven, like the voice of many waters. What do you think that means, voice of many waters? You ever stood next to like a waterfall and tried to have a conversation, right? It's loud, okay? It's powerful. When I lived in West Virginia where I grew up, I remember going to Blackwater Falls, which was not a massive waterfall, but you'd try to have a conversation standing down looking at it, and you couldn't hear anything anybody was saying, okay? So this is a voice that's very loud. It's like the voice of loud thunder, so it's also what? It's loud, it's powerful. And I heard the sound of harpists playing on their harps. Now, I normally start with the New King James, all right? But in this verse, I would prefer the New American Standard or like the 1901 ASV, because it reads like this. I heard a voice from heaven like, and that's the Greek word, H-O-S is the Greek word, okay, so like the sound of many waters, and like the sound of thunder, and the voice which I heard was like, that same word is in the Greek, the sound of harpists playing on their harps. So the voice is all three of these things. The voice sounds like loud waters, okay, it's loud, it sounds like thunder, it's powerful, and it sounds like music. So what is it? It's beautiful, right? So it's beautiful, it's loud, it's powerful, okay? And listen to what it says in verse 3. They sang as it were a new song before the throne. So if you remember back in chapter 5, do you remember it said that they had golden bowls of incense, which were the prayers of the saints, Revelation 5, 8, and 9. And it said that they had harps and they sang a new song, right? So throughout the book, we've seen Old Testament what? Old Testament terminology for worship, for different things that's basically serving as symbols for New Testament things, right? So once again here, he had this beautiful voice, okay? And what is it? They sang, this is likely the 144,000, okay? A new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth, okay? So we're going to see later, I think it's actually in chapter 15, what the new song was about, okay? But it's going to be in chapter 15, it's going to say the song of Moses and the Lamb. We've talked about how over and over you see Old Testament imagery. What happened when the people were led out of Egypt? They crossed the Red Sea. And you remember what they sang in Exodus 15? The song of Moses. It was this song praising God for delivering them from their oppressor, all right? And in chapter 15, they're going to sing the song of Moses and the Lamb. And the message that starts unfolding in chapter 15 is that God has delivered them from the oppressor, who's not Pharaoh anymore, but it's who? It's Rome, okay? And then in 15 and 16, you're going to see he keeps talking about the Exodus. He talks about all these plagues like darkness and boils and hail, right? So it's just all this Old Testament language that the New Testament Christians would recognize, okay? So they're singing this new song before the throne, the four living creatures, the elders, and no one can learn the song except for those who are faithful to God, okay? I've got a lot more, as always, in the notes, but just we're going to try to move a little bit quickly so we can cover a lot of ground today. All right, Revelation 14:4. These are the ones, the 144,000, okay, who were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. All right, now pay attention to this verse because there's a certain group, the Jehovah's Witnesses, that teach that the 144,000 is a literal number, okay? They'll say this is literally, it's referencing a specific people. In fact, I actually got a quote off their website. It says, this is a misconception. The number 144,000 is symbolic and not literal. They say that's a misconception. And then they said, although Revelation does contain some symbolic numbers, some of the numbers it uses are literal, and it references this 144,000. So they say this is a literal number, okay? The only problem with that is if you look at this verse, start in verse 4 again. These are the ones, the 144,000, who are not defiled with what? Women, for they are virgins. Okay, so if the 144,000 is literal, what would that sort of seem to point to? They're literally what? Men who are virgins. And these are the ones that follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They were redeemed from among men, being first fruits to God and to the Lamb. So the idea is, well, if the 144,000 is literal, and those are the only ones that are redeemed to go into heaven, and the rest of mankind lives on a redeemed earth, which is what they teach, well, then what would that mean for those in heaven? Who is it? Just guys. Sorry, ladies. And Matthew 8:11 is a verse you can use if you write in your Bible, where it talks about Jesus said, in the kingdom of heaven, they'll sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who all three were not what? They weren't virgins. They were married. They had families, okay? So it's not literal. This is all figurative language like you've seen throughout the whole book, okay? So it's...
When I read the part about them being virgins,
Yep.
I don't know about the women part, but I think about this being people who were faithful to God.
That's exactly right.
They were faithful.
That's right. So spiritually, they're what? They're pure. That's right. They're morally pure. That's what it's saying. And it makes sense because the people who are God's people in this this persecution are those who are faithful to him. Dwayne.
Egypt. Israel in the Old Testament is always talking about adultery.
That's right.
Going back to idolatry.
That's right.
Adultery.
Yeah.
Not being true to God.
And God many times would say something like, to Israel and to Judah, I raised you up. You were a beautiful young lady. I took you and raised you into a beautiful young virgin, and then you went and basically slept around with all these idol nations. God used that language in the Old Testament very frequently of unfaithfulness to God and compared it to this, unfaithfulness physically. So it's once again using Old Testament figurative language to talk about their spiritual faithfulness to God. So great points. Great points. Anybody else? You got me stopped for a second. Now's a good time.
If you keep that line of thought,
Yep.
These are they which followed the Lamb wherever he went.
That's right.
And they were redeemed from among men of mankind.
Yeah, that's right.
The world.
That's right. The faithful ones are those that follow the Lamb. Look at the last part of that verse. Being first fruits to God and to the Lamb. In the Old Testament, one of the feasts that they had was the feast of what? And there's multiple, all right? I won't make it that hard. Ingathering is one. There's Pentecost, right? But in one of those, you would basically bring your first fruits, which were what? The first things that you had that were normally some of the best, and you would offer them to God. And then later throughout the season, as the rest of your crops developed, you would give those too. So in this sense, it seems like he's saying the first fruits, the best, are those people who are faithful to God. And you're going to see what unfolds in the next two chapters is God is going to come down with a sickle and reap the evil that's on the earth, right? So it's this idea of, remember the wheats and the tares, the parable in the New Testament, where God's going to gather out the wheat, and then the tares are going to be judged and burned, right? So that's basically the idea he's giving here. Look at verse 5. And in their mouth, this is that idea of being morally pure, of the 144,000 it's referencing, in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of God. Without fault before God's throne. Does that mean they're perfect? No, doesn't mean. Nobody's perfect except Jesus, right? You're not going to be perfect. I'm not perfect. The more you get to know me or anybody else, you realize that everybody has their issues. But you don't have to be morally perfect. You just have to be faithful. I think about, we talked a couple Wednesdays ago about David, how 1 Kings 15:5, I think it is, talks about David's life and said that basically he followed God his entire life except for the one thing with Bathsheba. And we looked at how, well, that's not, David sinned lots of different times in the Old Testament. He ate bread he wasn't supposed to. He numbered the people when he wasn't supposed to. God even sent a plague. But as soon as he found out about the wrong he had done, he did what? He repented. And so when God looked at David's life, he said, David, what you look at 1 Kings 15:5 is David was good, except for that one thing with Bathsheba, where it seems like he was unfaithful for a period of time, right? So you don't have to be perfect. You just have to try. Whenever you mess up, repent, pray to God, get back on your feet, and keep trying to go. The devil wants you to just give up and think you have to be perfect, but you don't. 14:6. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people. Let's read 7:2. So what is this angel saying? He's preaching the everlasting gospel. The word gospel just means what? Good news, right? The Greek word is euangelion. EU is the word good, like eulogy is a good word, logos. So this is euangelion. It's a good message, good news. Okay, that's all it means, okay? Look at verse 7. Saying with a loud voice, this is the message that's good that he's pronouncing. Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth and seas and springs of water. So what is the message that he's preaching? Mormons that I've studied with a lot of Mormons, they use this verse to say this is the gospel that God gave to Joseph Smith later in 1830. In the context, what is the good news if you're a Christian being persecuted by Rome? God's going to judge them, right? So I know that some people, some guys that I know, think that this is talking about the gospel, the power of God into salvation, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Well, that's obviously the gospel in most of the New Testament. But in this, it seems the context seems to be, what is the good news to people being persecuted? Verse 7, fear God, give glory, the hour of his judgment has come. So that's right, that's right.
So it's not just a gospel for a particular time or season or whatever.
It's good news, that's right. So it's good news to these people who are being persecuted by Rome. And so you're going to see that as we keep going out, this message, Babylon is fallen and all these final judgments are coming, is going to elaborate on this message, okay? Look at verse 8. Another angel followed, saying, here's your message, Babylon is fallen. Fallen is that great city, because she has made all the nations to drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. In the notes, I have this exact phrase from the Old Testament. Isaiah 21:9, Jeremiah 51, 6 through 10 talks about Babylon the Great has fallen. God judged Babylon in the Old Testament whenever the people were in captivity. Same thing in the New Testament. As Rome's oppressing them, Babylon is going to fall. Okay, look at verse 9. I've got way more notes if you want to read more. I've got all kinds of Old Testament references you can look up for yourself. But let's go ahead and keep moving a little bit. Verse 9. Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast in his image and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. So verse 9 and 10 says that if you have a what on your forehead or hand? The mark of who? Which we talked about is likely not a literal mark. It's a figurative mark. God's people were marked for protection in the Old Testament in Ezekiel, in the New Testament in Revelation 7, and in 9 you have the good mark. In 13 you have the bad mark. So basically, does God need a mark? Does God need to look at Michael and see a mark on his forehead or hand to know who he serves? No, it's a figurative mark here. And God says, if you follow and you worship them, what's going to happen? You're going to be punished, right? Okay. And so the Old Testament is full of passages like this. Let me give you some. Psalm 75:8. For in the hand of the Lord there is a cup, and the wine is red. It is fully mixed, and he pours it out. Surely its dregs shall all the wicked of the earth drain and drink down. Okay? This is just common language in the Old Testament. God is going to pour out punishment. He talks about pouring out his wrath. Okay? Isaiah 51:17. Awake, awake, Jerusalem. You who have drunk at the hand of the Lord the cup of his fury. You have drunk the dregs of the cup of trembling and drained it out. This is just typical Old Testament language, all right? You can read all those in the notes if you want that as much, more notes. Tormented with fire and brimstone. That's something that God talked about in Sodom and Gomorrah's destruction. Isaiah uses that same thing in the Old Testament as well. Okay, is this literal? All right, so in Matthew 25:46, it talks about heaven and hell. And it says that heaven and hell are both everlasting. The New King James says everlasting and eternal, but it's the same Greek word. It's aionion, right? So the New Testament teaches that the punishment in hell is going to be eternal. Let's look at this, though. Turn your Bibles to 2 Thessalonians 1:9. So 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, you've got God saying in verse 5 and 6, the Christians are being persecuted, and God said, well, the Thessalonian writer, Paul, says, it's a righteous thing with God to repay those people who basically persecute you, okay? But look at what it says. And then in verse 6 it says, when God returns with flaming fire, taking vengeance on those who don't know God, don't obey the gospel. And then it says in verse 9, listen to what it says. These shall be punished with everlasting destruction from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his power. The New American Standard and ESV add the word away, okay? So shall be punished with everlasting destruction away from the presence of the Lord. So 2 Thessalonians 1:9, which is absolutely talking about the second coming and basically hell and heaven, says that they're going to be punished away from whose presence? God's presence. Now in Revelation 14:10, it says those who receive the mark will be what? Tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb, right? So some people say, well, this can't be talking about final judgment because it says they're going to be punished in the presence of God, whereas hell says it's going to be what? Away from the presence, right? I don't know that I'm going to spend too much time arguing with somebody about that. The context of the book has been what? The soon coming judgment of who? Rome, okay? So in a sense, I think it's saying, hey, look, God is going to put these people, he's going to punish these people, right? He's going to punish Rome. But then at the same time, the people that die unfaithful to God, where do they ultimately end up? In hell. So if you read commentaries or different guys on this verse, some will say, well, this is not the same thing. Some will say it is. It's just using different language. You can pick that for yourself. I don't think that's a humongous sticking point. Okay. Look at verse 11. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever. They have no rest day or night. who worship the beast in his image and whoever receives the mark of his name. Okay, this sounds like what kind of punishment? Eternal, forever, punishment. So it's saying, look, if you receive the mark, ultimately your destination is going to be where? It's going to be hell. Yeah, okay. There is some interesting language in Isaiah 34:10 that's pretty similar to this. It's speaking of the destruction of a nation, Edom, okay? And this is what Isaiah 34:10 says. It shall not be quenched, talking about the nation of Edom, its destruction. It shall not be quenched day or night. Its smoke shall ascend forever. From generation to generation it shall lie waste. No one shall pass through it forever and ever. Okay? So some people say, well, look, this sort of language was used in the Old Testament figuratively to talk about the destruction of a nation, right? I'll let you take your pick. It doesn't really matter to me. Either way, we know hell's eternal from Matthew 25:46. Okay? Now look at verse 12. So after telling you about some of this punishment, it says in verse 12, here is the patience of the saints, right? This is what should give you patience and comfort as a Christian. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus Christ. Verse 13. Then I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they may rest from their labors and their works follow them. So verse 12, what should give you patience and comfort in the face of potentially dying if Rome attacks you and you die from their persecution? Is that what? You get to go to heaven. Yeah, you get to go to paradise, right? You get to go to a place that God has prepared to take care of his people, okay? So it should be comforting. This is sort of unrelated, but there's a funny story I've heard about Marshall Keeble. Marshall Keeble was a preacher, I don't know, do you guys know the exact dates? Anybody know? Early 19, I mean, it was the 1900s, right? Yeah, 50s. So anyway, he was a preacher, and he got asked to go preach at a congregation, and I don't know if it was the elders or the preacher, but they told him, hey, we'd like you to talk about giving because this congregation are really poor givers, right? And so they said there was a congregation of 100 people, and they gave $25 a week, right? That's how I heard the story, all right? So I don't know what congregation it was, and I'm not trying to pick on them. But the funny thing about it is the story goes that he started uncorking, and pretty much the whole gospel meeting, I think, preached on nothing but giving. And the preacher came up and said, you're going to kill these people if you keep preaching on giving. And he quoted Revelation 14:13 and said, blessed are those who die in the Lord. So, yeah. He said, okay, if this is going to kill you, then, well, so that story always comes to my mind every time that I go to that verse. So, okay. Back to 14. Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and on the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. All right? So who's the Son of Man? Jesus, all right? So it says, they looked up, and what does he see? He sees a white cloud and Jesus Christ sitting on it, right? That's not uncommon. Go in your Old Testaments to Isaiah. I think it's Isaiah 19. Yeah, look at Isaiah chapter 19 and verse 1. Isaiah 19:1. It says, the burden against Egypt. So this was a prophecy that Isaiah was giving against Egypt. Listen to what he says. Behold, the Lord rides on a swift what? Cloud, and will come into Egypt. The idols of Egypt will totter at his presence. The heart of Egypt will melt in its midst. All right. So when God punished Egypt in the Old Testament, did Jesus literally ride in on a cloud? No, it's figurative language. It's saying God is coming in judgment, okay? That's just how the prophets wrote. So in verse 14, behold a white cloud, here comes the Son of Man with a sickle. I don't think that anybody expected to see Jesus riding on a literal cloud with a literal, gardening instrument of a sickle, okay? It's just saying God is coming to punish Rome, just like he punished Egypt. Now look at verse 15. Another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, saying, thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. Got a lot more notes in there. I'll give you one. Joel 3:13, speaking of judgment, Old Testament prophet, put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come and go down, the winepress is full, the vats of their wickedness overflow and are great. Right? So this idea is, once again, Old Testament. You're probably getting sick of hearing that, aren't you? Like, okay, we get it. Every single thing is... Okay, good. All right, well, good. So she likes the constant. But all it is saying, this is all language from the Old Testament, which just shows the importance of learning your what? Old Testament. This is, honestly, the book of Revelation is what made me even want to start studying my Old Testament, especially the prophets. I'd normally start in the Old Testament, I'd read Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, I'd sort of skip over. Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, all the kings, David. I'd get to where they go into Babylonian captivity. Maybe I'll read the Psalms and Proverbs. But I didn't read the prophets very much because they seemed repetitive, a lot of figurative language. I didn't know the history of it, right? I like Daniel. But there were some of the prophets that you read that's just kind of hard to understand. Well, it's because a lot of it's figurative language about God judging a nation. And so when you get to Revelation, if you know the Old Testament, you say, oh, this isn't Jesus literally riding on a cloud. This is just like he said when he was going to punish Egypt, right? So you see this. I have way more things in the notes. But the idea is that Christ is coming to judge Rome. That's what would be good news to Christians being persecuted. Look at verse 16. So he who sat on the cloud, that's who? Okay, Christ, thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. Then another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, who had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, thrust in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. So the angel thrust his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. Okay? So what's being the picture here is that John looks and sees Jesus and all these angels, and they're talking about coming down with a sickle and reaping the earth, and they're going to put those grapes right into this winepress of the wrath of God. Okay? Isaiah chapter 63, verses 1 and 4, another Old Testament reference. Let's see, verse 2. Why is your apparel red? Why are your garments like one who treads in the winepress? I have trodden the winepress alone. The peoples, from them no one was with me. I've trodden them in my anger, trampled them in my fury. Their blood, okay, so that's the idea of grape. What happens if you get grape on like a white shirt? It's going to stain it, right? So this idea of grapes is sort of like blood. You'll see that. It's in the Old Testament. Their blood is sprinkled on my garments. I have stained all my robes. For the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed has come. So basically, Old Testament, people have been persecuting Israel, and God's going to come and do what? He's going to reap the grapes. He's going to stomp it, but it's going to be blood. Flip over to Revelation 19 really quickly. We're not going to read all of Revelation 19, but just go to Revelation 19. Go to verse 13. Well, go to verse 11. Verse 11 sort of gives you some context. Now, this is going to be like later, whenever Christ actually just wipes everybody out. Verse 11, I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on him was called Faithful and True. In righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes were like flames of fire. His head had many crowns. He had a name written that no one knew except himself. He was clothed with a robe, dipped in what? Blood, and his name is called the Word of God. The armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. Okay, so it's going to talk about him basically just destroying everybody in Revelation chapter 19. Okay, so you have him treading this winepress, judging the nations with this grapes that in the Old Testament represent blood, and later you see him with his robe stained in blood. Okay, it's just saying he's coming to judge the earth. Look at Revelation 14:20. And the winepress was trampled outside the city, and blood came out of the winepress. Now here's really interesting. Up to the horses' bridles for 1,600 furlongs, all right? There are a lot of people that believe that the book of Revelation is literal, that say this is literally going to happen. They say it's going to be a 200-mile-long swath of blood that is literally up to the horse's bridle, okay? I don't think it's literal. I think it's figurative. Depending on your translation, some say 1,600 furlongs. Does anybody else have something different? Some say stadia. Some, like the New American Standard, translate it like 200 miles, which I think sort of takes away some of the figurative language, right? I think this is the horse's bridle, okay? Blood up to a horse's bridle, right? If you look at Jewish, apocalyptic, non-inspired literature, right? These are some books that were never included in the canon. Nobody ever said they were inspired, but they were like Jewish writings that talked about different things that happened. They sort of use this language a lot, right? I've got a quote from the book of Enoch. The horses will walk up to the breast in the blood of sinners. The chariot will be submerged to its height. They're saying there's going to be this awful war, so much blood that it's going to what? Submerge a chariot, right? Is it literal? Is that literal? No, it's figurative, right? This is a guy named Gill. He has an exposition of the Bible as a commentator. In like manner, the Jews would express a great slaughter of men. For instance, the slaughter at Bither by Adrian, they say, they went on slaying until a horse plunged in blood up to his nostrils, and the blood ran 4 miles into the sea. Is that literal? No. Nobody in the first century had one of those laser I don't even know how they work, but you know, like the DOT guys have like a laser. You always see them on the side of the road, and there's like another one, and they're measuring distance, or, you know, there's nobody in the first century out there with a tape measure measuring 4 miles out into the sea. It's figurative language, okay? It's just expressing this idea that there's lots of what? Lots of blood. A big, bad battle, lots of punishment, lots of judgment, okay? That's right. Lots of people where the blood came from.
You know, not just going to be a few people. There's going to be a lot of people that's going down the wrong
Yeah,
way.
that's right. Second Esdras is another one. This is uninspired Jewish literature. They will smite one upon another, and they shall smite down a great multitude of stars on the earth, even their own star, and blood shall be from the sword into the belly. It's just commonly how Jews in the first century wrote, okay? It's Jewish language. And obviously, in the first century, who are all the apostles? They're what? They're Jews. A lot of the Christians are Jews. Some are Gentiles. They knew this kind of stuff, right? To us, it sounds foreign. What does it mean the blood was to the horse's bridle, right? It's just the way that they wrote. So sometimes you can consult extra biblical stuff and say, oh, this makes sense, okay? The 1,600 furlongs or stadia, when you got the 144,000, remember, how do we get to that number? Yep, 12 times 1,000, 12,000 from each tribe. 12 was a number that represented organized religion, and 1,000 is completeness, right? I don't know if that's what the 1,600 comes from. 4 represents the world. 4 squared is what? 16. 10 is another number used for completeness. Is that how they got to 1,600? I don't know. That's my best guess. That doesn't bother me too much, right? Okay. Let's go to chapter 15 now. Any questions on 14, comments before I move on? Oh, yeah. I think it's right at the beginning of the book of Hosea where he says basically go marry a wife of whoredom, and you're going to have these 2 kids, and you're going to name them, forget the names, like, what, you remember the names, Hosea? Yeah, and the names meant these things. And that's what God said many times. He said Israel was bad, like a really unfaithful daughter, but then Judah, you were even worse, right? If you read the Old Testament prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea is a good one, you'll see that really quickly. So yeah, it just meant unfaithfulness, right, to God. Okay, Revelation 15 is a short one. You're going to see this song of Moses at the beginning, saying God delivered them, and then you start to see the 7 vials that had the 7 final plagues. So Rome had been given a chance to repent many times, and what did they say? No, we're not going to repent. So God said, okay, I've been patient with you, you won't repent, so God's going to bring final judgment. Okay, look at Revelation 15:1. I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them the wrath of God is what? Complete. You've had, in chapter 6 and 7, we saw the 7 seals, which were, if you remember the fraction, 1/4, right? And then you had after that the 7 trumpets, which were what? 1/3. So it's increasing judgment. God was patient, now he's done. And so this is going to be the final judgment, okay? Look at verse 2. I saw something like a sea of glass mingled with fire. And those who have victory over the beast, that's who? Faithful Christians, right? Faithful Christians. Have victory over the beast, over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, standing on the sea of glass, having harps of God. So these faithful people are standing in heaven, and they're holding harps. And look at verse 3. They do what? They sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb. So the song of Moses and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and marvelous are your works, O God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of the saints. Verse 4. Who shall not fear you, O Lord, and glorify your name? For you alone are holy, and all nations shall come and worship before you, for your judgments have been manifested. These types of praises are found throughout the Old Testament. I have a whole list, like Exodus 34, Deuteronomy 32, Psalm 98. You can look those up on your own time, okay? So basically the people have been, they know that they're going to be vindicated. They're in heaven singing the song of praise. And look at verse 5. After these things I looked, and behold, the temple of the tabernacle of testimony in heaven was opened. So this is talking about, remember before they built the actual temple, what did they travel around in? They worshiped God in the tent, the tabernacle of witness. So it's saying in heaven now, there's the tabernacle, right? Verse 6, out of the temple came the 7 angels, having the 7 plagues, clothed in pure bright linen, having their chests girded with golden bands. This is what priests dressed like in the Old Testament, okay? So you have this idea of the tabernacle. It's called temple, but temple means house. So you have the tabernacle. These people are coming out dressed like priests. Look at verse 7. One of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the what? The wrath of God who lives forever and ever. So one of the 4 living creatures, likely cherubim that we saw in chapter 4, come out and give these bowls to the angels, okay? Verse 8. The temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one was able to enter the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. So the idea is that these bowls of final wrath are given to these angels to pour out on the world, on Rome. That's what the context of the whole book has been. But nobody can go into God's presence until it's done. So it's sort of saying God's already what? He's made up his mind. Nobody's going to come in and change his mind. No one's going to come in and ask him, please, please stop. At some point, God makes up his mind. Okay, I've given them chances to repent. They won't repent. Now it's time to bring final judgment. So when we start into chapter 16 next week, we're going to look at these 7 last plagues, the bowls of wrath. If you want to read through, you pay attention to how much it references the Egypt account, right? The Exodus motif. It talks about they poured out this plague and it was like boils on people's skin, right? That's a plague. It was dark. They poured out this bowl and all of the water became like blood, right? That's there over and over. It talks about frogs in chapter 16. Frogs was a what? Plague. So over and over, John is calling people back to, hey, you were in Egypt and God delivered his people by what? All these plagues. In the same way, God is using that to represent God's going to deliver his people from Rome, okay? We'll pick up next week in chapter 16. Chapter 16 is going to be fun. We're going to talk about Armageddon. We're going to talk about all the wars that have happened there in history. One person said, he that controls Armageddon, the hill of Megiddo, controls basically the whole Middle East. So we're going to talk about that. I'll have some pictures, a PowerPoint presentation, and it'll be fun next week, I think so. So it'll be fun for me. So you can tag along if you want. So, okay, we'll pick up in Revelation 16 next week. If you need the notes, there's a sign-up list in the back. Thanks for your attention. If you have any questions, come up and talk to me.